We will start today by taking an industry-wide view at some of the trends that we've seen across the entire natural language processing industry. Many of these things are things that we'll dive deeper into in many sessions during the summit. Let's start with seeing really where NLP is as we are nearing the end of 2020. So there's a lot of excitement right now in the industry and in the research community because over the past years, really NLP has been through a revolution, which happened thanks to deep learning, thanks to transfer learning. 2019 specifically was a very big year because on 3 separate reading comprehension milestones, and you can see it on the screen, we had Squad 1, Squad 2, and conversational QA. We hit a point actually in the same month, in the month of March 2019, which should go into NLP history. It was the first time where algorithms beat the human level of performance. And the humans in questions are native speakers or in college in North America who answer those types of questions. So while there definitely is a lot of very relevant discussion about the fact that yes, you can play all kinds of tricks to actually answer these questions correctly. And the other thing to answer is that the way we do SAT exams and the way we teach kids to pass those exams is using the exact same tricks. So yes, we are very far from understanding language yet in the general AI sense. But it's getting harder and harder to differentiate between how humans do it and how machines do it. In 2020, what we are seeing is really a boom in moving this research to applications, to industry, to real products and real services that people are putting in place. This is just one example. Spark NLP is have you seen, is the main library that people use when they go to production. And we have seen just in 8 months a 5x increase in the amount of just PyPy downloads. And this does not include the Java, the Scala communities, and Conda. But this is kind of in line with what you're seeing in terms of interest picking up. And a lot of it is really people understanding, okay, yes, we have the research papers, we have a whole new world that's of application that has just become possible. And now people are actually starting to apply it. Another data point that we have is from the NLP industry survey that we have a deep dive session about coming up soon. We've seen, and this survey, what's interesting about it, this was done after COVID. This was done during the summer of 2020, so really deep in recession. But what we are seeing is that consistently technical leaders and people who are technical decision makers are seeing kind of significant increases in NLP budgets and in systems that they're actually, where they're hiring, they're building systems, they're deploying a system into production. So it's definitely, it's a super exciting space to be in the industry. And of course, research is continuing as always. Another thing that's happened here, I mean, these are just some of the awards that the Johnson Labs won in 2020. And really, when you look at it even 2 years back, thinking that healthcare analytics provider of the year would even go to an NLP company would have been questionable, right? Because NLP was really just a much smaller piece of the whole puzzle of analytics. But definitely in 2020, NLP is having we're having a moment in the sunshine as people really understand. Okay, the technology is there. It's time to go and build those use cases. And a lot of what you'll see here in the summit are kind of actual implementations, best practices, design patterns, risks, challenges that people are hitting as they're doing just that. So the question to ask to all of us really, as a community, as an industry, is okay, how do we enable this scale, and how do we make this succeed? How do we establish best practices earlier, not repeat some of the errors of our predecessors? And here are a few things that we are seeing that seem to be consistent. So one thing, and the first and most important thing that we care about, because everybody else seems to care about it, is accuracy. The most important criterion that people use when they evaluate libraries, when they evaluate solutions, cloud services, any of that, is just how accurate the system is. So a lot of what we do is we re-implement things. The really cool thing actually about the NLP space is that research is still moving at a very, very speedy rate. If you follow the leaderboards on NLP Progress or some of the Stanford or other leaderboards, you'll see that when you claim that you have a state-of-the-art system, you usually stay at the top for maybe 6 weeks, and then someone else comes. What it means is that if you're building a library and you're claiming to provide state-of-the-art NLP, you do have this Sisyphean task because every time you claim you're done, someone else comes up with something better. And a lot of it, for example, with Spark NLP, a lot of what we are doing is we are re-implementing basically the same functionality with new algorithms, new deep learning models, new pre-trained models to achieve that better accuracy, right? So 2.4, we redid name entity recognition, we improved OCR, we redid entity resolution and entity matching. In 2.5, we were really happy to announce that we now have state-of-the-art spell checking and sentiment analysis. And of course, like a year before, we already had state-of-the-art spell checking and sentiment analysis. The problem was that the state-of-the-art keeps moving, right? What's achievable and the best accuracy you can get keeps improving. So that's been our first and topmost focus, and that I fully expect this to continue. And a lot of what we do is, okay, just follow the research and see what we can actually reproduce and what actually scales, and just keep delivering that to the community. And of course, it's not just us, it's what other libraries are doing as well. But I think just the pace of advances in research, it's inspiring, it's amazing. I think that there are a few research areas that really improve this fast. So at least for those few years, while it's happening, I'm sure we'll hit the wall at some point. We're not there yet, and we are just doing our best to follow that and just make it open source and available to the industry and the community. The second trend that we are seeing also across all libraries, across the industry, is really just make it easier to use. And as you know, with new technologies, there's always step one, just make it possible, right? With like TensorFlow 1.0, okay, look, you can actually build those graphs and deep learning network, and it works. And of course, it needs a lot of expertise. But then the immediate question, okay, can you give us something like Keras or PyTorch or something simplified or something pre-trained, right? Where I do not have to actually have a PhD. I can just I can read the notebook and copy paste from there. And that's a very valid request. What makes it possible? So the only thing that makes the simple API possible is, of course, you have to have it working first. So you have to figure it out first. Actually make it run, at least once. The other thing that you do when you simplify things, you embed best practices, right? So the reason we can give you something in a single line of code is because we basically know what the defaults are, right? What reasonable defaults are. We don't just include the algorithms of the code, we include some design patterns, right? There are some assumptions on how you want to integrate it within other things. So what you get is not just the fact that you can do things faster without learning as much. You also get a lot of kind of best practices and design patterns that are embedded. So specific for us, we've introduced the NLU library, which really enables you to do like really simple stuff. And the focus is, open source Python one-liners. So you do import NLU, and then you do something like NLU.load emotion, predict, I love NLU, and this loads an emotion analysis module that, in this case, is pre-trained and tells between, surprise, sadness, joy, and fear, right? And this is just one of over 300 models that are there. And of course, there are other libraries that have even more models. But the key thing is make sure that, we can just nail it down to a one-liner. Right, you come to look. I just want sentiment analysis. I just want emotion analysis, and you say, look, here you go. You don't need to read the whole book that comes before it, unless you really want to or need to. One thing that really comes together with simplicity is integrating with the bigger ecosystem. In the data science space, this mostly means Python nowadays, but there's a whole ecosystem of libraries, starting with with pandas and matplotlib. And Spark and other things that people already love and use. So here are a couple of other examples of what NLU does. So here's an example for language detection, right? So you can, same thing, NLU.load lang, which is kind of the default language detection, predict. You give it a set of sentences, and you get per sentence what's the predicted language, in this case, English and French. Here's another example, also one-liner that does spell checking and spell correction. So I like peanut butter and jelly, and here, as you can see in the original tokens, like peanut butter and jelly are all misspelled, and the pre-trained model automatically corrects them. And unless you really need to train your own model, because you can say, no, I'm working in the legal space, I have a separate vocabulary, or I just want to train, this for Portuguese. Really, a one-liner is all you need. If you want to train, of course, all the APIs for that exist. The nice thing about not just the NLU library, I mean, there are obviously others in this space, is that they work really from data frames to data frames. And then, of course, they work on pandas data frames, but you can work directly with Spark, you can work with Dask, or you can work with Apache Ray. And I think we have talks here specifically about Ray and Spark and how just how you use NLP within those ecosystems, within those libraries. And part of what you get is, in terms of integration, is also the fact that basically you don't need to know how it works, right? So you can say, look, it's still one-liners, but yeah, if you distribute a cluster of using a multi-core machine, yeah, you're going to get the speed up, okay? And you need to know very little about distributed systems to make that actually work. Another trend that's growing quickly is increasing support for other languages. And that's a topic of great academic concern, because the number of active human languages on Earth is declining. There are some languages that we are unfortunately going to lose. And there's a lot of work done on saving those languages, reviving those languages, or even just simply representing them in the online space. And within the applied ecosystem where we play, our role is really just to make sure that when new research becomes available, so we can come and say, look, now we know how to build this model for 50 languages, 200 languages, 500 languages. Here are the data sets. Look, you're just training to get the results. Our role is to make sure that we provide something that's production grade, pre-trained, represents those languages, and available as open source to the community. Right, so that it's not just an academic paper, it's something that all of us can use and build on. So here are just a couple of examples with Portuguese and Russian. I mean, Spark NLP right now supports 46 languages, of course, in different ways. Some languages have more models than others. There's still a lot of work we still want to do. But overall, if you look at our, globalization, so, last summer, this was our globalization story. We have US English. And across the industry, really, I would say until very recently, there were two languages in which you really could get a state-of-the-art NLP, which was US English and Mandarin Chinese. And there was some research about others. Here's where we stand today. So there are many more languages that are supported out of the box, and many more models that are there. One other thing that's very exciting and happening in the research space is zero-shot learning. Which means that in many cases, right, of course, there's, not always, you do not have to go and label data in each and every individual language, because those are slow and expensive projects. You can have data labeled in one language, say English, and as long as you have just bodies of text of unsupervised, unlabeled bodies of text in both languages with our matching, for example, literature, Wikipedia, that's enough to do some sort of transfer learning. And that's really one of the things we are looking at as a way to provide the open source community and the industry state-of-the-art support for many, many more languages. I would say we still have a lot more work to do in this space. We're working on things like Chinese, Japanese, Korean. We're working on right-to-left languages, so Arabic, Hebrew, Urdu, Farsi. And of course, there's much more we want to do within the languages we already support. We are also always looking for contributors in this space. So another trend that I'm sure you've seen and will definitely grow is basic curated models. So one of the problems when you support so many languages and you support so many use cases is that you end up with thousands of pre-trained models that support different use cases. And then really the problem becomes, look, how do I even find them and how do I know which one to use? And this is a problem that everyone in the industry is solving the same way, by having model zoos or model hubs, right? And the most famous ones are, of course, the TensorFlow Hub and the PyTorch model zoo. But Hugging Face is a great one. There's the NLP Model Forge. We have a model hub as well for the Spark NLP ecosystem. But basically, each ecosystem is getting to a point where there is a central place where you can find the right models, you can find the recommended ones, you can know which ones are kind of commercially supported, up to date or not. which one you're supposed to use, and there's a way for the community, right, for people to upload their own models and discuss them and such. And that's another trend that's great to see, because it means that you no longer have to Google things or look in individual GitHub repos and try to see versions match and such. You have really a more curated experience where there's discoverability, you have search, you have tags, you have version matches, you know what data sets something was trained on, often what are the accuracy metrics. And really, if you look at, when you're looking for an NLP library, you're looking for a library as well as a set of pre-trained models, right? It comes together, and it's great to see that the industry is moving to provide that. So those are the main big themes that I'm seeing across the industry, that we are seeing. And then the question is, okay, this is nice. What else can you tell us? So the first thing is that those are not just 2020 trends, right? If you look at 2021, 2022, 2023, and beyond, yes, we are going to get more accurate models that are easier to use in more languages, and just more of them, right? And that's really should be the focus, right? So accuracy first, then inclusion and globalization, making things simpler and easier to use, making models easier to find, right? And there's a whole lot more we need to do there, right? So the fact that we kind of have the first version there, and of course people are using them and building, of course does not mean that we are done or something else will come up. But there's one more thing that seems to be emerging, and that's Auto-NLP. So Auto-ML has been kind of a thing for a while, with the goal of enabling really experts who are not data scientists to train and build custom machine learning models. This is going to be super critical in NLP, because one thing to remember in natural language processing is that really, no matter how many pre-trained models you have, if you're building a real industry production use case, you will need to train your own models. And I keep saying this for a few years, and I'll say the same this year. I'm yet to see an actual industry case study that did not need to train custom models for a domain-specific question, because language is varied. Language is different in every domain, every style of document, every business domain. And the other thing is that the bar for what we want to do with those systems is rising, right? So if 10 years ago, if I had a list of legal documents, look, if you can just put it in a search engine and give me decent search, that's amazing. And now I want to do, no. If there's a patent filing, I want to know, look, are we infringing this patent? Right? So now we're working with doctors, and they're asking things about, look, what do we need to do about this tumor? Right? Is this patient at risk? Right? What's the histology values for this patient or this pathology? Right? If you're dealing with customer service, right? You're dealing with things. Okay, which products are they looking for? What are the objections? How can we best help them? In finance, right? We're analyzing legal filing. Now it's not just extracting data from tables and PDFs. Now it's okay. Are we allowed to invest in this? Okay, which is really a question for a banker. So what we need to do with Auto-NLP now is we need to enable doctors and recruiters and product managers, lawyers, academics to answer the semantic questions that they actually care about, which means that they need to somehow teach the model a lot of domain expertise that they have, right? And it's not just about taking the data scientists out of the picture. It's enabling really super experienced domain professionals to do what they do and kind of share their knowledge and teach a model. And here are a few more examples, right? So there are some projects we've seen in the legal space, in the recruiting space, in the academic research space. Here at the NLP Summit, we actually have sessions about each and every one of those verticals from companies and teams who have actually built systems within those verticals. So if you're working with it within that area, you'll be able to see some of the challenges, early wins, lessons learned from each one of those. One of the keynotes you'll see later on today is about a first early system that actually does Auto-NLP, in the sense of taking kind of the standard design pattern for NLP in 2020, which is you pre-train your BERT-based embeddings, or you pre-train embeddings and models. Maybe you fine-tune them to a specific vertical, like healthcare or finance. Okay, but then you adapt them, meaning you come say, okay, I need this specific question answering, right? Or I need this specific name entity recognition from this style of documents. And this adaptive step is really what you are looking to automate away, where you want to automate away the data scientists. So you want to enable domain experts to come, define a project, define, say, the entities they want to extract, start with some pre-trained models, even if we know it's not completely accurate, right, or it's very partial. Start annotating and really train the system, showing what's right, and have the system continuously retrain, basically until it gets it right. So that's another thing that we'll show you today, something that's starting. We are seeing it beginning to be implemented in the field, and we think it's going to be pretty big in the years to come. So that's my overview. I have one more request. We are super excited to have you all here. Here are my contact details. I'm here to learn from you, to speak with you. Please be active, participate, take the opportunity to really come together as a community, so that we can learn from each other, we can get to know each other, and we can really help the AI world move together slightly faster.